Welcome to the ImmortaliTea Podcast. I'm your host, Jake, here with Josh Hyde. Today we're going to drink a very exciting First Flush Darjeeling from Rohini Estate in India. Darjeeling, of course, being the northernmost province of India, right at the foothills of the Himalayas, very famous tea-growing region. We just got this one in a few weeks ago. It was grown early March, I believe, so it should be good. So I'll just start heating the teaware. We are doing this Chinese Gong Fu style, even though it is an Indian tea. These Darjeelings, as we get them, are whole leaf, so they can definitely stand up to Gong Fu steeps and a Gaiwan. Traditionally, of course, these are drinking like English style because they're grown. Tea was introduced to Darjeeling by the English as an attempt to get away from a reliance on Chinese tea.
So this whole opening process for the tea, what would you call it?
So I threw the first round of hot water down to just ready the teaware, essentially. I will not rinse this one. Some teas want to be rinsed, so in other words, throwing out the first steeping. However, this one is fairly delicate. Preheating just... Well, make sure everything is hot, first of all. The first steep, of course, being very short. All the steeps are short.
And then how long are you steeping this particular First Flush Darjeeling?
Oh, I think we just did like about a 5 or 10 second steep. So the idea with a Gaiwan is that there's obviously quite a bit of the space in the vessel is filled. This is about the same amount of leaf as you would put in a teapot. Of course, a teapot being about, 5 to 10 times the volume. So you just proportionally reduce the steeping time. So just 5 or 10 seconds, whereas like maybe in a teapot you would do a minute or 2 minutes. Oh.
This one is super floral. Can you describe the flavors coming off of this one? Because for me, as a tea layman, like I'm tasting some type of grape and then something else that just tastes fresh, and I don't know how to describe that kind of fresh flavor.
Yeah, so I think you're on the right track with grape. Darjeeling's one of the main descriptors that you'll hear is air quotes muscatel, which means grape, pertaining to grape. It's used in wine. You can go ahead and fill me up. So there's definitely with the first flushes. These are lighter teas. This is technically an oolong, but certainly on the lighter end of the oolong spectrum. So for these, you're going to be getting more white grape, floral bouquet. I feel like there's something of like cotton candy or Jolly Ranchers in this one. I always describe this one as like some kind of... There is definitely like a bit of an artificially sweet flavor in a good way.
What happens with the multiple steepings? How does that work? Because sometimes when I'm drinking tea with people, Gong Fu style, they're always amazed at the multiple steepings that you get to do on the teas.
Yeah, so this is kind of the thing about Gong Fu style, Josh. It was originally basically created for oolong teas. Oolong teas being twisted, rolled, kind of more complex. So whereas I was talking about with a Western style tea, a Western style steeping of tea with a large volume in a teapot and a small amount of tea, you're steeping everything out of the tea at once in a teapot. But with this, you're getting, I would say, maybe cross sections of the tea. Each steeping is going to have its distinct character. Each steeping is going to have its distinct flavor. And certain types of tea steep differently. Like this one's not going to steep quite as long as like a ball-rolled oolong or a rock oolong or a pu'er. But we should be able to get 4 or 5 good steepings out of this one. Like I said, it is an oolong. So do you want to just tell me how you think this one's different? Don't be afraid to slurp.
Oh yeah, that's nice. It seems like the fruitiness or the floralness has moved to the front.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's just there's more flavor there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you can kind of see it's like it's opening more, right? The leaves have expanded quite a bit. You can like almost see like whole leaf complexes now, whereas before it kind of looked like dried, twisted stems. But so as the leaf opens up, the leaf gives more flavor, right? And the other nice thing about Gong Fu, as opposed to like a Western style teapot, is you can really modulate the steepings to your preference, right? So I kind of think of it as like driving a manual transmission versus an automatic transmission. So I kind of decided just then that like, well, that was nice, but it could be more flavorful. So let's see what happens if I just like push this steeping a little longer this time.
So every cup, you are basically testing the flavor, seeing how it's steeping, and then adjusting
Sure.
your steep time for the next cup.
Sure, kind of, yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And you learn the more you experiment with different teas, like what kind of tea needs what your preferences are. Some people would like a really strong steep. Some people like a really light steep. Some people like to, cool off the water, rinse the tea a couple times, yada yada. There's just a lot more freedom, I think, with a Gong Fu setup.
And for me, I think it's the first time that I really got to experience the chi of the tea or the individual tea's energy.
Yeah. Do you want to sniff that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. So by smelling the top of the lid, you can actually get the real floral experience.
Yeah.
Or just the...
Yeah, it's another like level of sensory immersion, right? Ooh, that's a nice yellow color.
Yeah, that is really nice.
Ooh, that's hot.
The Gong Fu style really allowed me to feel the energy of the individual teas.
Sure. See, I might have pushed that one a little too hard, right?
Yeah. Well, and so when you steep too long, kind of the more bitter flavors come out. What is that?
Generally like tannins, polyphenols, if we're talking like in chemistry terms. It's just like how like a very tannic wine can be kind of bitter.
So the longer the steep times, the more of the bitter kind of tannins come out.
Generally, yes, yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, but of course, you're also getting you're also getting more fruit with the tannins in this. In this, I think there's like some, I don't know, like what do you think, like a ripe pear or something? It can be like walking on a razor's edge sometimes. Sometimes you want to push the tea to see what you get, but sometimes you push a little too far.
So by the flavors of what we're tasting within this tea, if there are tea drinkers listening, what do you think, if you like these kind of teas, you might like this First Flush Darjeeling?
I think this would be good for someone who like already maybe knows they like something like a Chinese green tea or like more like a floral oolong, like a Taiwanese oolong. This would be something maybe to branch into because Darjeelings aren't generally drinking in this style. Of course, we do here work with the farmers to tell them kind of what we want, and like we do want something that will stand up to Gong Fu steeps, and a lot of that has to do with like leaving it whole leaf as opposed to like chopping it. A lot of Darjeelings you'll see are like chopped, not these like really nice whole like leaf bud. And that's just going to steep a lot nicer in Gong Fu because it takes time to unfurl. So a very chopped tea, it would maybe have the problem of that one steeping that I pushed too far, right? Like, it would just it's a little harder to control. Just everything comes out at once, and then like you're kind of like left with not much left. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, and like the way that I look at it is the plant has been dried down so much that the multiple steepings allow the plant to kind of rehydrate itself, but also give its essences into the water.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one's nice. I've been drinking this one recently a lot just because
it's super good. Yeah, not a lot of people have 2020 teas in right now because of the apocalypse.
Well, and I think that's something good to talk about. All of this tea sourcing that we're drinking right now is coming from Trident Cafe and booksellers.
Yeah.
And then they've kind of expanded into Trident tea, and they have just a very high quality tea sourcing. So I'm really glad that it's available, because when I steep tea for people like this and they experience kind of how the tea comes back to life, and you see the beauty of the whole leaf and its flavor, people just kind of...
Well, it's pretty. It is pretty magical, right? It's like it's basically this plant that was grown in the foothills of the Himalayas. This like very like if you look at pictures, it's a very like beautiful like region. And this is even like the low-lying stuff, but it's it's pulled like the nutrients from the ground, like it's breathed the air, and now by steeping it, like you said, we're pulling some of the essence into the water, and then we're taking that into us. So, there is like a mystical dimension, right? Like there's an element of communion with the world.
I feel like when I stop drinking tea for a while, my body starts to feel differently. I feel like there's so many different nutrients, minerals, vitamins, and, just plant goodness.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's basically like leaf soup. It's super good for you.
Yeah. With the tea that we're drinking now, how many steeps do you think someone could get out of this tea?
Like we're doing it like maybe 5 or 6. I can't remember. I've been counting. We just did the 4th, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll do one more and see where we're at. I mean that's pretty good for a Darjeeling though. It's kind of losing a little sweetness right now. It's still got a lot of strength though. There's like some minerality. I think there's more floral and grassy character to it. But I think like the more you steep it, it's just gonna kind of tend towards more like green beans and grassy, more just like the vegetable notes.
And then when do you know a tea is done steeping? Because I think everybody has their own preferences.
Yeah,
but
everyone has their own preference.
But is there like a general kind of line where you start to notice the flavors start to disappear?
Yeah, and especially like when it starts losing like body and just becomes like kind of like hot water. Then it's like, yeah, I mean, you can tell fairly easily, like, oh, this tea's dead, this tea's like kicked or whatever. I don't know. I guess to answer your question though about like what kind of person would I recommend this tea to? I don't know. This is a very like pretty tea. It's very drinkable, also fairly complex. I think it's kind of good all around. It's good for a beginner, but it's also good for someone like looking maybe for something a little different. Because like I mentioned a couple times already, you don't usually find like really nice gung fu-able teas like this from India. We definitely have a few. We have some Assams too that will gung fu. We have some other like really interesting things from this estate, like for instance a ball rolled green tea from a Japanese cultivar that of course was grown in India. So maybe we'll do that one later.
So where can people find this tea?
So we have this one and the others, some of the others that I mentioned on our website, tridentcafe.com/teas. Or if you live in Boulder, you can come in and talk to a manager, either me or Peter, and we can definitely take you through what we have.
Jake is one of the tea tasters, tea buyers, tea sellers at the Trident Cafe, along with Peter Jones. That's interesting because I think that's how this podcast came about, was a bunch of tea drinkers talking about their tea drinking habits. But then also for me, as I traveled and I would drink my tea, everybody would be fascinated about where can I get it, because I haven't tasted tea like this before. Some of the exact responses I got were, I've never had tea make me feel like that.
Yeah.
And then they asked me what that feeling was, and then
Sure.
I explained it as being tea drunk, which is
Sure.
more like happy and giddy and like hungry.
I mean, part of that's certainly the caffeine, right? However, unlike coffee, tea has other chemical compounds in it, notably L-theanine and GABA, which are actually calming. So whereas with coffee you kind of just get like a rush, with tea you get a rush, but it's also focused. So it's both uplifting and calming. And of course there's also, then there's like more of the, whatever you want to call it, magical or metaphysical qualities that some people attribute to tea, like qi. People believe that you can you get like life, like vital energy from, you know, like I said, taking communion with the plant, which I mean I buy. Like, you kind of have to experience it, but it's, I mean, you can like feel the energy like moving through you, and it's not like it does not feel like a, you know, a drug or a psychoactive quality. It's like a very physical quality.
I totally use the energy to help me work, so
Sure,
I think
sure.
it's a good thing.
Sure.
What are some final thoughts about this tea and about how we steeped it, or anything about this tea for all the tea drinkers listening?
So, I mean, I think this is just a really special tea because it is so young. It's also very unique. It's a Darjeeling processed as an oolong, made for Gung Fu steeps. I think, you know, anyone interested in Chinese-style tea drinking should definitely give this a try because it's something very, very unique. So thanks for joining us here at the tea table. You know, if you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to us. Hope you enjoyed.